Shalom. Thanks for joining me. All right, I'm going to pick up again in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21. Jesus is now beginning a series of teachings where he starts off with the expression that says, "You have heard it said," and then he says, "But I say." So it's a whole series. There's 6 of these. He's on the subject of murder, adultery, divorce, oaths, eye for an eye, and love for enemies. These are the 6 areas that he's going to talk about. And it all starts, each one of these areas start off, "You have heard it said, but here's what I say." And so what Jesus is doing in this next section of teachings, he's explaining that there is a common teaching that has been passed down all these decades, and it is skewed. It's off a bit. It's not quite right, but I'm here to correct it. And so I'm going to change what you think it's supposed to be to what it actually should be. And he's talking about moving from external confirmation to rules and regulations to an internal conforming to God's will, where there is inside of our heart a dedication and a love to God himself and to people. And so here's the first one. And he talks about murder, and he also talks about making reconciliation in relationships when when you have problems in them. It's one of the reasons why some people murder. And so it's interesting. Starts off, "You have heard," this is verse 21, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." Now, interesting, these little phrases here. Not done with the whole thing here, but I want to back up on this a little bit. Murder means just what it means, to kill someone. And he says you would be subject to judgment. And in the Greek, that's the word kriso, which is a root word for a word called critical. You may have heard us use the word critical thinking, critical judgment, not criticism. Sometimes criticism, it's a root word for the same thing. But when they're using this word, they're talking about a legal judgment. So in other words, if you murder someone, you are subject to legal judgment, which would be true. But then Jesus says this, "I'm going to go beyond the act of murder. It is not only wrong that you murder someone, it is equally wrong that you want to murder someone." Now, that's a deeper righteousness, and this is what Jesus said in chapter 5, verse 20, when he said, "Your righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law." And here's one way to do it. It's not only wrong to murder, it is equally wrong to want to murder. So he says, "I tell you, anyone who is angry," and that word angry, by the way, is the word ogizomai. It's a word that describes like a rageful, you're tensed up, you're raged up, you can feel the heat coming up in your face, and your ears are hot, and your heart is pounding, your muscles are tense, and you are filled with rage. And that if you're that angry with your brother, your sister, he said, you will be subject to judgment. Now, he's using a legal term there, by the way. Very interesting. And then he says, again, anyone who says a brother or sister, "Raka," which is a way of saying you are worthless. He said, you are answerable to the Sanhedrin. That's the Greek word there, Sanhedrin. In English, is translated court. You are subject to the Sanhedrin. So you would go before a religious governing body. And that would be the way in which you are punished for just thinking and calling a brother an empty, worthless person. And then the next part, "And anyone who says, 'You fool,'" in fact, in the Greek, it's the word more, which is the root word for moron. You're a moron. If you say that about another person, you are in danger of the fire of hell. And that's Gehenna, pyros in the Greek. Fire, pyros is fire. Gehenna is the name of the valley outside Jerusalem that was the garbage valley. It was the garbage dump, and people dropped their trash and their garbage there, and it was set on fire so it would burn up. And it became a picture of hell. And they would use it that way. So what Jesus is saying is if you reach a point in your attitude toward your fellow human being, you could be just as guilty of murders if you had actually killed them. So your righteousness has to be more than just the rules and the regulations. It has to be inside your heart, the way you feel towards another person. That's interesting, don't you think? And then it says this, verse 23, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come on and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you're still together on the way, or your adversary will hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Now, there's some interesting things in here because what Jesus is saying in here, the thing that matters more than anything else, more than showing up at the temple with an offering and a sacrifice, beyond that, is that you are living in peace with your brother or your sister. You must live in peace. You must live in harmony with your brother and your sister. And I will tell you, you know as well as I do in real life, that's not always easy. That's not a simple thing to do. But that's what Jesus is telling us. And it matters to Jesus. It matters to Jesus that we are living a life of peaceful harmony with our brothers and sisters. If there's any one thing that Jesus wanted us, his followers in the world, to be characterized by, is the love that we have for one another, instead of the anger and name-calling and hate-filled hearts that we can have. Important to pay attention to that. Thanks for joining me on that one.